Hello, coin traders. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me. Going to be looking at ICP, Internet Computer, ICP on that ticker. And like the rest of the crypto space, starting to get stuck up right now on this daily time frame, currently at the 12-period exponential moving average. Now, this is after we started to think that we might actually see higher lows on crypto and actually start to see this oversold bounce start to play out. But with a little bit of this rejection, if we don't actually get over that, it's going to be not so good for a lot of the rest of the cryptos right now, and specifically want to start talking about this ICP chart and what we can expect for some of the future and some of the time frames coming up here, short and long. So if you are new to the channel, huge welcome. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you have not done so just yet, so you can stay updated on all types of content like this for the crypto space and all types of analysis for different charts as well. All right, so do want to start off diving into this one-day chart, talking about the current setup and what we're looking for right now in the immediate short-term future. So right now, big resistance points for close coming in right at the 360 line. So as you can see, no candles have been able to close above this level. Did hold it as brief support on the way down, now finding plenty of rejection and resistance on that. So even if we zoom out, you can see plenty of times where we actually bounced, and especially most recently on the flush that happened back on the 10th of June. Big bounce and maintained it as support. So 360 was that big support. Now flushed, and now we found our low for ICP down just above the $3 line at 318.3, which does mean now, especially after a failed continuation, still finding this 360 level as a big point of daily closing resistance. So now let's look at the level of closing support. So we do have a level of closing support coming in right at 340. So this is going to be a very big zone and channel that we're going to be looking at right now in the coming days here, because we do have a lot of buying pressure as indicated by these wicks, which does help maintain that 340 closing support. So if we do in fact lose that, then likely we're going to be expecting a price to actually bottom out and actually see lower lows beyond where we found our higher low bounce come in. Right now, though, crypto is extremely volatile, so we're seeing a lot of different types of moves that don't necessarily correlate to what we typically expect on oversold daily and longer-term charts like this. And that's, again, why we always try to be reactive and not predictive when it does come to actually playing out these charts. Man, now in the video from a few days ago and our last ICP video, we talked about ICP breaking this massive $4 psychological level that had been such strong resistance before finding such strong support, and then now 3 days of consistent downside, blowing just completely past this big support zone. So there's not really a lot of immediate opportunity for the bulls to actually see a rally up to this $4 level in the near term, especially with so many strong resistance points up overhead. And in one of our recent videos talking about the pullback, I did mention that two things have to happen on big sell-offs like this. Either the price has to normalize and we have to see a recovery, or the sentiment has to normalize and accept this new price action. So right now, especially having found a lot of opportunity for prices to bounce, but lacking that follow-through and basically having the bulls fail in that front, that does lead to sentiment normalizing along the zone, which is one of the things psychologically that does create this type of consolidation move when we talk about financial market dynamics. So now flipping on over into the 2-day chart, couple of things to look at. First thing, we're still maintaining 340 support, and this is across the close on all of the 2-day candles that we're looking at. So closing support, closing support, closing support, most recently over 3 consecutive candles. So plenty of tests of opportunity right now for ICP to blow bearish below the support line, but bulls are maintaining a very nice support on top of 340. Now, in addition to that, there's a pattern that I want to actually point out. So we're actually forming more or less a longer term falling wedge. So essentially you can see how big this trend line has been in effect. So we had it as support, flipped it into resistance, and then now once again flipped it into support and support. Now, we do have a downtrending resistance line, which does form the upper level of this wedge. So if we actually draw and we can see resistance the whole way down, we're actually looking at forming, holding, hopefully support, as well as this 340 support line. And if we actually run down to the apex, you can see that the apex, let's actually clean this up a little bit here. Oops. So we can see now that the apex is actually going to align about 320, which is kind of where the all-time low is right now, that we did see a lot of price buying at that level. So potentially we could see support still maintain a trend line to the downside before ultimately bouncing off 320 as that lower support. So that could be one of our big patterns to play out, and ultimately the apex does form until about the middle of October. So we do still have about a month and a half until that does form on this 2-day chart, so plenty of opportunity to still see sideways, more or less downside trading. And even if we draw a trend line from where we found our previous lows coming in to about where we see the lows bouncing now for support on this 2-day, and that's also going to have us aligning in this support level for this falling wedge as well. And this is actually a very relevant trend line as well, because we do look at it as support. So support recently, we also found it support on the bounce back in the beginning of June. And then we also found it back at the end of the year before our initial start of the year rally. So more or less did find a double bottom effectively and still have maintained this trend line as support. So we are still eyeing it despite having a potential of pulling back to about 320 or so. So we know the point is that from 340 to about 320 is going to be an extremely strong zone right now. And so if we do end up seeing a close below 340, I would expect a test of 320 to come in. But ultimately, we do know that this level in this zone is just going to be so supportive, and likely we are going to expect a lot of buying to be coming in around this key and critical zone level. Pulling up some technical indicators here really quick, specifically just want to look at the RSI Relative Strength Index, because we do have higher lows forming substantially on width. We do have lower lows in price. So typically we are going to expect a little bit of decreased selling pressure, which does mean that this overall downside move is going to be a little bit weaker than what we initially experienced back at the start of June. Obviously, not to say we're going to be seeing a bounce and a movement to the upside, because we could still see another leg down. But we do know that this is one of the signs and signals that we do look for to talk about weakening moves, especially when we look for establishing some of our strong support floors, like we just talked about with 320 up to 340. If we flip over into the weekly right now, you can see that the weekly candles are still holding me 350 for closing support on these weekly candles. So on the weekly level, this is going to be one of our huge key critical supports that we have been defending for ICP since almost a year ago at the start of November, when we initially had our first FTX flush. So this has been a very nice big line for the bulls to defend. So we are looking at 355 being the weekly level of closing support that we have experienced. And so that's why even looking at this downtrend line that forms this descending triangle on this weekly, and also the falling wedge on some of the other shorter term charts like the daily and the 2-day, it is going to be so relevant to see what happens here in the next month, whether or not we can actually break above this trend line, because that will signal likely a very strong defense of not only the support line to the downside of 355, but then also turning this resistance into support, which hopefully should be enough to actually confirm and trigger the next leg of upside movement. The thing about that trend line too is that if we actually zoom out, you can see that that is one of the areas that if we go back to our peak last August of 2021, that was where we found our initial first resistance zone and point after coming off the initial launch, which was right around the $82 level. So this actually forms a perfect nice downtrend on this logarithmic scale, starting from our top back at 82 back in the August of 2021 timeframe. So because like we just drew it, that's actually going to be an extremely big opportunity to break this very massive and long-term downtrend line, assuming bulls are still able to confirm and maintain 355 as that big support level. If we do lose that on the weekly, that's going to be another bad sign, which does mean those tests of 320 and then the $3 psychological level. Now, if we pull up the technical indicators, specifically RSI, I want to look at this divergence again, because as we maintain 350, you can see that this is pretty much a clear picture of just a rising and divergent price level compared to the weekly RSI. So obviously coming off a huge sell-off on the launch did push the initial RSI down extremely. But then ever since, you can see the RSI on the weekly has been recovering, and now, despite being at all-time lows, we're actually kind of at weekly all-time highs for this RSI, which doesn't really say much since it is still below the 40 line. But the fact that we have been trending to the upside still shows that we are losing a lot of that downside selling pressure despite being at those all-time lows. And although it is possible for this to continue to push back to the downside again, we do have to be mindful of the fact that we do have a rising trend line for this RSI overall on the whole, where we do have higher highs coming in as well as higher lows overall. So keep in mind too that this pattern has been playing out for over 2 years now, or should I say exactly 2 years on this RSI. So it's definitely not something to negate and write off completely just yet. So right now, my biggest worry is just the fear that this current pattern is going to turn into some type of flag and bearish continuation pattern, which would likely see prices continue to push to the downside. That's not necessarily a guarantee that we're going to see a new lower low and a new all-time low right now for ICP. But the way the current pattern is starting to set up right now, that could be a very realistic scenario, which obviously wouldn't necessarily be that great for any potential speculation of bullish upside. So that is what I'm going to be looking at heading into the weekend here, and also what we're going to be expecting over the coming days and weeks for ICP. Always love hearing everyone's thoughts and predictions and your own targets and what you think is going to happen down in the comments sections below, so don't forget to drop me a note. That is going to go ahead and wrap it up for us with ICP, though. ICP on that ticker for Internet Computer. Do hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. As always, appreciate all the continued love and support. It does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, everyone, and I'll catch you back in the next video.